Well, hello, we are back. Welcome to another episode of the William Hill Squareball podcast with myself, Dave McIntyre. We've got another amazing guest in the can for you today. Really can't wait to get into this discussion. We've had a brilliant few weeks. We've had some unbelievable people stepping into the guest chair over the last few weeks. If you're watching us on a weekly basis on YouTube, you're very welcome once again. Please continue to leave your comments. We really appreciate the level of engagement, particularly in this in season 2 over the last few weeks that we've had from our listeners. It's the At the Squareball Pod YouTube page. Please subscribe, leave a review, leave a comment. Any suggestions for some guests, any suggestions for some questions within the chats we've been having with those guests would be really welcome as well. You can get us on our social media channels as well, at William Hill Ireland on Twitter and on Instagram. Get in touch with us there also. There's also plenty of other really good sports content on there as well. And wherever you're listening to us on your podcast app, if you're listening to us on Spotify, please like and review, leave a comment. And we love to get our listeners' feedback as well as our viewers. Again, anyone you'd like to have on the podcast, let us know. We'll try and make that happen. We've got a few episodes left in season 2. We've got an All-Ireland football and hurling preview coming up as well. And then after that, we'll have another couple of episodes before we sign off for what has been a brilliant second year of the podcast. And that's not to say we should forget season 1. So many unbelievable guests. The vast majority of the content we've generated so far is not dated in any way. You can dive right back in to the Sean Kavanagh episodes, the Darren O'Sullivan episodes, the Kieran Whelans, all these people. If you're a hurling lover, we've got Tommy Walsh and Owen Kelly and Paul Flynn, Joe Canning. They're all there. And even if you're coming a year late to the party, it's still as relevant as it was the day we recorded it. And it is hurling that we're going to focus on today, because our guest this afternoon, an iconic figure of Offaly hurling and 1990s hurling. When you think of that great decade, the revolution years, which will come up, he's one of the first names that you'll think of. He was a brilliant man, a key man in the midfield of one of the most beloved teams of the last 25 years. 2 All-Ireland titles with the faithful county, 4 Leinster titles, an All-Ireland minor, collected an All-Star in 1990, a brilliantly decorated club career as well. 4 All-Ireland titles with his beloved Birr. A glorious character in a decade of hurling characters. We are so honoured to welcome to the Squareball podcast, Mr. Johnny Pilkington. Johnny, you're so welcome.
Dave, thanks very much.
You're blushing.
I am. Very impressive introduction there.
When's the last time anyone spoke about you in such glowing terms? You wouldn't get that from your wife.
No, I don't even get it from my friends, so I don't, you know.
Anthony Daly had a great quote about you. He said, for a fella who liked a fag and liked a pint, he could certainly get around the place, which is a backhanded compliment to say that you were one of the great hurlers, despite some of the enjoyments that you had away from the field.
Yeah, I was blessed to have a natural fitness, and so that helped me in a big way. I was blessed as well that I was injury-free for nearly all my career, so that helped me in a big way. And yeah, at that time as well, the off-the-field excursions were an awful lot more and less frowned upon than they are at the moment. So, yeah.
Did you smoke throughout your inter-county career?
Well, not during the matches, obviously. But yeah, listen, I wasn't one of those lads that you could say, oh, listen, he's down in the corner having a cigarette. Yeah, I did. Yeah, I picked up the bad habit at around 16 or 17. And listen, I was very thankful enough to be able to get off them.
You went off them after you retired?
Yeah.
So how many would you have been on a day, like, say, during the halcyon days of...
probably about 30.
Really?
Yeah.
And it, like... Even at the back end of your career, like I was watching footage of the 2000 All-Ireland semi-final against Cork, the reigning All-Ireland champions. You're up against Sean Og, like the Adonis, the man sculpted from granite, one of the greatest athletes of his generation. And you are keeping right with him. This is the back end of your career. You're over 10 years an inter-county hurler, smoking 30 smokes a day, and you look as fit and energetic and pacey and capable of staying with someone like him as you ever did.
Well, the times were different. I remember being at an all-star do, and at the time there was the 6 midfielders were actually at the same table at the do, and out of the 6 of us, 5 of us were smoking. That in the 90s, that was listen, it was part and parcel of it, I suppose. And if you go into any team or anything, you know, there was always 3 or 4 lads in it. Having said that, could have been any intercounty team as well as any club team. Definitely, it was on the club team. But then that changed. I don't want to be here promoting cigarettes or the lifestyle of it. They don't do anything for you. But I had a natural ability of a fitness ability, which I've been. Don't get me wrong, you chase after Sean O'Galbeen once, it's going to take you 5 minutes anyway to get back to chase after him again. and that's what you do. You kind of get your breather and you go again. And one of the great things about that Offaly team as well is that you could go forward. Now, it used to take me, what people don't realise, it used to take me about 5 minutes to get back out to the middle of the field. I'd get a breath, but then Dignan would go to the middle of the field. Johnny Dooley would take up that role and off you'd go again. So,
did it affect you, do you think? Do you ever wonder, given like how many years you're off them now, and you're looking great as well, do you ever wonder, God, I wonder, would I've had another 5% or another 10%?
No, I mean, listen, if I actually went and wondered if I had another 1% or 2% and everything, and if I changed my life, I would have had another 100%. But one of the things, I'm just happy enough that, listen, that was me. I mean, change it to different and you're a different person and that. I totally enjoyed hurling and that, but I also enjoyed being away from hurling. And I think a lot of lads will even tell you that as well. When you're in that, I was one of those kind of people that kind of, you know, came up to a match and the ball was thrown in and that's when you're kind of serious. Even at training, once you go to train, once you cross the line, you know, well, then you put everything into that. Irregardless of what obstacles are in your way, that can be anything that's self-inflicted, and you push that back and you drive yourself on, you know.
Well, it certainly never seemed to affect you on the field, Johnny, given what you went on to achieve, which is just brilliant. So there's 7 children in the family, and it's one of these kind of old school family businesses that has 3 or 4 different arms to it. So everyone was expected to muck in and roll their sleeves up from day one.
Yeah. A business that originally started off with my grandfather. Obviously, I think you're going back probably early 1900s, and the father took it over. My grandfather was unfortunately killed by a bull when my father was very young. The grandfather was very big into show cattle at that time. There was a big agricultural Birr show which he was heavily involved in, and it just turned around. The Hereford bull turned on him, and at that time, father took over the businesses. Then at I think about 16.
Wow.
He was in Mount St. Joseph's in Roscrea. He played rugby. He played GAA, of course, the time of the ban. And he often said, or he often told us there that the rugby crowd came saying, listen, why don't you try the rugby? And, we had a Father Vaughan in the time, old school, you know. And so he went off and he played the rugby one Sunday, Monday morning. Father Vaughan, what were you doing yesterday? What were you playing at? And it says, don't be at that, you know. So the next week, the father actually was asked to play rugby again. He says no, he couldn't or whatever. He ended up, I think, a week or two playing it again, you know. And then he just went over to the rugby, you know.
Right.
So he started a business, or he continued on the businesses. And at that time, we had a farm, a dairy farm. We had a shop and a milk ground, you know. And then at that time, you know, there was 20, 30 shops in Birr. This is going back obviously to the 60s, 70s, you know, and the 80s. Nearly every house in the town was getting milk delivered at their doorstep. And we've managed to kind of maintain it all the way through.
That's
just
amazing.
About.
You could nearly spend an hour or two chatting about the Pilkington family business in itself. I often heard, I would have worked with Dahi Regan in a previous job a lot. Great fella. And obviously one of your old friends, and I've often heard him saying that the Offaly hurlers should be playing in Birr and not in O'Connor Park in Tullamore, that Birr was the heartland, the heartbeat of Offaly hurling. Talk to me about the town, the dynamic of the club, of the mix of the kids brought up in the town and the kids who would have been brought up in the rural areas surrounding the town.
Yeah, like Birr and Offaly at that time, Offaly hurling was concentrated around Birr. Birr really, okay, we had a kind of a strong hurling club, But that was more to do with population than actually if you go 5 miles out the road to a Coolderry or out the road to Rhinus or out to Shinrone or Ballashkinnock, Kinnity, Clarine, all these hurling areas, that hurling is instilled into you, you know, and that club thing is instilled into you. Whereas in Birr, you had a choice of soccer, there was rugby there as well. And that. So, but Birr always, and the Offaly team always held there, the county finals were always played in Birr. And again, mainly because, you know, you go 5, 6, 7 miles around Birr, and that was your main senior clubs, all 7 or 8 of them, you know.
So tiny pocket, really.
Tiny, very tiny pocket, you know.
Then which makes it even more astounding that Offaly managed to achieve what they did.
It is, yeah. I mean, yeah, when you take a look at it, it's kind of one of those things, well, anything is possible, you know. Once you go from Kilcormac then on to Tullamore, that was mainly the football end. So, I mean, at that time then, Offaly decided, listen, we were going to redevelop one of the fields, so they picked Tullamore. And there's probably loads of reasons for it, and that. And the hurling was drifted out of Birr. Had that much of an effect on Offaly hurling at the time? It probably did.
Right.
Because no matter where you are, like, I mean, if Offaly hurlers are hurling in Birr, you have the kids coming in from the surrounding areas. If Offaly hurlers are hurling in Tullamore, you know, you will not get, you will lose an awful amount of those kids kind of coming in and looking at them. Conversely of that, you'll have the Tullamore kids, the Edenderry kids coming in to look at them at that. And as it turned around, maybe that's like, you know, our Offaly senior hurling team at the moment has 6 or 7 Ballinamere lads on it. And maybe that has been a product of that. Yeah.
It's, again, another debate that we could have for a long period of time. There's no success in Offaly for so long. And obviously the hurling is bubbling away within the county. But you're 9 years old when they win the Leinster title in 1980. They'd featured in one Leinster final in the previous 52 years. So there's nothing for you to kind of hang your hat on as a young child or any of your club mates or your friends. No tradition of success, not at senior, under 21 or minor or club level. From what you can remember around that time, like what did that Leinster success and then the 2 All-Ireland titles that they won in 81 and 85 do for a county and belief within a county that up until then had nothing to believe in?
First and foremost, you know, I remember Pádraig Horn and coming down from Dublin after the Leinster final, and he came down our road. Our road would have been the old. If you wanted to go to Dublin from Birr, you went from Birr to Kinnity onto Mount Mellick, Kinnegad, that way up. So he was coming down the road on the bonnet of the car with the Bob O'Keefe, you know, at 10 o'clock at night and the horns blowing, you know. And so that was the first memory I have of it. I suppose, really, you know, in 78, when we kind of look back on it, that Offaly team, you know, of 70, you know, I think the bet Wicklow, 3-2, about 2 years prior to that.
The championship?
Yeah, in the championship.
Literally 3-2.
Yeah, 3-2. Yeah, no. So, but they also had won the under-21 in 78. The colleges, as in Birr or St. Brenda or the Birr colleges at the time, came into Birr Community School, you know, had played where Ken Hogan was on it, Joe Dooley was on it. They had played Northman, or I think it was Northman, in 1980, you know. So there was that little bit of success there in terms of that to help come on. I suppose it's hard to know what the 81 done, the win, but obviously it had to have some effect because we won the minors in 86.
Yeah. 3 minors in 5 years.
3 minors in 5 years. Again, you know, maybe it was a catalyst to what we would look at it is in terms of we had a brother Vincent in the national school that it was just hurling. But all national schools, I think, were, you know, in our area and around the thing, they were hurling. There wasn't anything like now where you bring in every subject or every hobby, you know. So, and you had a brother Dennis, obviously, in the community school, and they dictated it. But saying that, obviously the win, you know, obviously a young lad like myself, you're picking up a hurl. and you're hitting it off a wall. And then what we had then on top of that, I'm talking about at 11 or 12 then, after the 81 All-Ireland and the 80, we were picking up a hurl. We were encouraged. We were nearly driven by and then on top of that, from our point of view, we were winning at underage. So it was easy, keep on. But definitely every lad was picking up a hurl. Every lad was beating the ball off a wall. And then throw in every parish there, you had a passionate hurling man over over all these kids, whether it be in Shinrone, whether it be in Rhinus. Like there was God love him, God rest him, Jackie Rylan. Lads used to be up he's from Rhinus and in Banagher, and he'd be up in there. The lads would be up kicking a football. In the GA field. Next thing, Jackie would come around the corner, ball gone, hurls picked up, and we play hurling, because he knew Jackie would nearly get a knife and burst the football, So that was probably the big thing.
You were on one of those minor teams, 87?
Yeah, 87.
And your brother was on one of those teams the year before, and then the one you won as well. The list of players who won those medals that went on to win the All-Ireland in 94, you've got the Diagnans, or Michael Diagnan, the Pilkington brothers, Di Regan, the Wheelahans, the Dooleys, Troys, Joe Erity, Rigney. I mean, talk about a conveyor belt of talent that's all coming through at the same time. Like what a melting pot of brilliant players all trying to outdo each other that must have been.
Outdo each other, I don't know.
You're not driving each other on like...
Yeah, there would have been like one of the things, I suppose, prior to, and this is where Padgett Whelan comes into the picture. One of the things that Birr and Rhinus in our age group and at our level, like ourselves, say Diagnan and Dottie Regan became best of buddies. But prior to 1987, Diagnan was with Rhinus and Regan was with him, and there'd be no talk, there'd be no speak, and there was, and it was always the Rhinus and the Birr and Lussman, they were all separated and no one was joined in. And the first thing that Padgett did in that Offaly minor dressing room of 86 was he got Regan from one side of the dressing room and he sat him down beside Diagnan on the other side, and he created that mix. And then everyone in the dressing room, we won't say the bitterness was gone. It definitely, in the GA, the bitterness doesn't go. And you can sit beside your friend, you can have a pint with him, you can have a cup of tea, you can have the whole lot. Half an hour later, 3/4 an hour later, you are going to do your best to, get the better of him. But it did, they were all of the same mentality. You go out and you're into a training session, and whether it's trying to outdo him, definitely Regan didn't want Diagnan getting the upper hand of him. Because he knew damn well that Diagnan would be slagging him afterwards, and vice versa. And it's not just them. You had John Troy, Johnny Dooley, Brian Whelan, Kevin Martin, and everybody.
You beat Tip in the minor final in 87, and it's a rain-swept afternoon at Croker. And Galway, you're beating Kilkenny in the senior game later that day. I've asked this question of so many people who've been sitting in the same seat as you, Johnny. What it must feel like to have won your minor final, and the joy and the satisfaction and the elation and relief, and then to be able to walk up the steps into your seat in the Hogan or Cusick stand and sit there, even though you might have been getting wet on this particular afternoon, and then watching the senior final unfold, and that you've got your medal won.
Yeah, the big thing actually about the 87 and in the dressing rooms in the old Hogan stand coming out of the corner, there you go in coming off the field, and there's a dressing room door on your first, and then there's a corridor into the left, and there's two more down here and one up here, and we were just on that bend, we were on that. But I remember standing at the door and looking at Galway coming out, and in 87, and you're talking about Finnerty, you're talking about Keady, you're talking about Linsky, Joe Cooney was on that as well,
mountainous men,
and they're mountainous, and I'm only a whip of a lad, this is all I am, it's good. And I was just amazed at the size of them and the whole lot. And after that, actually, right, we went up into the Hogan stand, top deck of the Hogan stand. I just happened to be sitting beside both Offaly Tipperary teams seemed to be sitting together, but anyway, Conal Bonner was sitting beside me, and for the whole bloody minor match, all he could say is, "I can't believe he beat us." I can't believe you, Beth. Yeah. I went on holidays about 10 years ago. I think it might have been 10, even 10 years ago. And who was out on holidays? Only Conal Bonner. And we were up at the pool. The kids were there, whatever. They're all mixing and it was great. And here he was on still again. I can't believe he Beth. I can't believe he Beth in that one. You know? Now, he did get his revenge. He did get his revenge, of course, in 89 and that, you know. But I didn't go on whinging about, you know, I can't believe he Beth in the 89 one. And then just the last piece, you know, I do remember running out in 94 and a minor team looking at us in a minor.
Who was the minor final that year?
Don't know. I don't know, to be honest. It's just, probably Kilkenny, more than likely. I don't know who was in it. Another small thing, actually, even after that, in 87 and even in the 2000s or whatever, when after the All-Ireland, I think it's gone away with now. The day after, you had a banquet with the seniors and the minor teams, you know. And I remember there one year, actually it was the 87, after the 87, you know, the bus was late because Declan was talking farming to Jerry Henderson, like you know. So that mixture there where you were able to mix with the seniors, it's a pity it can't be still done.
So you're brought into the senior setup back end of 88, is it? You're only a year and a bit out of minor.
Or something, yeah.
And you've Offaly won 5 Leinsters and 2 All-Irelands in the 9 seasons before that. So like they've come from very little to being a genuine hurling superpower over the course of the 80s. So when you go into that changing room under a new manager, PJ Whelan, who you've mentioned, so obviously you know him really well. It's no surprise that he's brought you in. He knew all about you, but what's the dynamic in that changing room that you're walking into?
In that one, you had just, to me, and to looking back in it, you had 2 sets in that. You had the 80s team and you had these young whippersnappers coming.
Minors.
And the minors, you know. And it was a very hard thing to gel, you know. So it was. And I suppose the mix wasn't there, even though we did win 89 and we did win 90. The gap wasn't there. The mixture, lads didn't gel well together as such. I mean, in my own, and this is only my own opinion, that I get on very well with the 80s team now. I have great chats with them. I admire them. I always did admire them and that. But I always feel that it was maybe my career was finished before they accepted me. Okay. You know that. Now I don't want to blame them. It's just you know, or for that.
Was PJ trying to utilize the same methods in terms of trying to get that group to gel as he did with the way you described with Dignan and Regan there?
I suppose one of the to illustrate it was I was out in the golf club. I was playing golf with Regan. We used to get up early in the morning for some ungodly hour to play golf first, and his father, God rest him, was the worst golfer in Birr. But I think he decided to play bad to have that title, but that and a different story. But we were in the golf club, myself and Dottie. This is a good 10 years after we had both finished up and everything. And Mark Corrigan came into the golf club, and we went back to the 89 Leinster semi-final, or the All-Ireland semi-final against Antrim. And I just passed the comment, says, well, listen, we would have been better off anyway, because Tipperary would have probably given us a hiding. Now, again, I'm coming from a young lad or whatever at that age, looking up at Tipperary, who had won the 87 and won the, you know, obviously they won the 89, and you're looking at the Pat Foxes, and you're looking at the Conal Bonners and that, and Cormac Bonner and Nicky English and that. You know, but Mark Corrigan turns around and says, what are you talking about? You know, he says, like Hanami always could always manage Pat Fox. Eugene Coughlin could always manage, you know, Cormac Bonner or that. And went through it, you know, and sure, right, you had Conal Bonner, but sure, I mean, you know, Mark Corrigan could have taken him and all right throughout it. So it was a pity that, you know, maybe at that time, that off the field psychology and that meeting thing wasn't there in that place. And, you know, if it was, there would have probably been an awful lot more belief in that team. But as I said, that's where Mark Corrigan and Johnny Pilkington didn't communicate. Yeah. And unfortunately we did, of course, 10, 15 years later.
A lot of people were last weekend with Dublin, or a weekend before last, when Dublin beat Limerick. immediately they're going into the record books, into the archives. Where does this rate in the pantheon of the all-time greatest shocks in the history of the All-Ireland Hurling Championship? And the one that people constantly go back to is that Antrim game that you've referenced there, the 1989 All-Ireland semi-final. Do you, in hindsight, look back and can you remember there being any sense of complacency or a drop in standards? Like Antrim had never reached an All-Ireland final. No one had gave them a chance of even running you close, let alone beating you. Like in the build-up, can you put your finger on anything that might have been wrong in the days beforehand?
No, there wasn't anything wrong in the days beforehand or anything like that. The one difference was that Antrim were knocking on the door. Even the year before, they ran Kilkenny close in an All-Ireland semi-final. And even at that time, in the 2 or 3 years prior to that, Antrim had coming down. We would go up to Antrim to play them in the league. They had bet us, so they had no fear of Offaly and probably had no fear of anyone because, as I said, they had a good team. The day, so in that there was no build-up, but it was always there. Antrim were always going to get that, one day because they were building. They were used to playing against the top teams. There was no fear. There was no worries about, if we go behind, what we were going to do, Now, the day itself, as it turned out, Antrim never panicked whatsoever. I mean, I think we went in 3 or 4 points up at half-time. And it comes out and a little bit sluggish probably in the second half. But then it all starts to, in one way for us, it all starts to fall apart. In one way, and obviously for Antrim, it just kicks off. And it's to get 1 or 2 goals, as Dublin did, to put the gap.
Yeah.
And then I just remember then being like that. There was only twice where I was actually ever wary of the crowd in Croke Park. And when Antrim scored their 3rd goal, you had Galway and Tipper playing beforehand. You had 40, 50,000 people nearly on their feet because the underdog was winning here. And the roar, it's even sending goosebumps, on the hairs of the back of your head now, still the roar that was there. I said, well, listen, fair enough. And the other time, obviously, was when Clare ran onto the field, unfortunately, in 95.
So for Liam Hetherington and those 2 crucial goals in Dublin Limerick, you've got Ulcan McFetteridge. Big goals at big times to give them that oxygen.
To give them that oxygen and give them that belief and give them that, in games like that, your legs can begin to weary and, and your belief in your can begin to say, what's happening here, or will we hang out? That second goal then gives you that, hey, listen, we're onto something here and we'll drive on,
So you're still really young though, like that's your first season. So you've already won a Leinster medal.
Yeah.
You're established in the panel. Probably not as devastating for you, this defeat, as it would have been for some of the more experienced lads in the squad.
No, I mean, obviously you're that's 89. The following week we played an All-Ireland under-21 game against Tipperary, lost by 2 points. Again, a massive crowd at that. We played in the 91 All-Ireland, under-20 All-Ireland. The 91 All-Ireland under-21 and the 92. So, I mean, for us lads, there was still that, success and sure, listen, it's next year and, there's no panic. At the same time, I would turn around and I'd say to myself, listen, well, obviously you kind of have an ambition to win an All-Ireland, but I would have been the type, it wasn't my goal.
Yeah.
Let's see what's going to happen. And I mean, I think even when I finished up and I was asked, I finished up, and on the last year, Pat Mallochny was the selector anyway, and God rest him, he passed away a few years ago. But he had asked me, what will will you give it 1 more year? And I said, I'll tell you what we'll do. If we can get Kilkenny in the first round, I'll play 1 more year. And the reason behind that is that if we can put it up to Kilkenny and beat Kilkenny, well, then we have a shot. Prior to that, this was in 2001. In 2000, Kilkenny had given us an awful hiding and 99 as well. So, we were on the back foot at that stage. So it was the same thing for me, even at 18, 19, 20. You couldn't look past the Leinster Championship. You couldn't look past the first round. So there wasn't much point in talking about All-Ireland.
Yeah. And obviously there was no back door, so it wasn't like you could fall back on a second chance.
Yeah.
Offaly continued to develop, albeit and this has been a constant theme of your career, regular managerial changes. It always seems every 18 months you guys have to go back to square one with a new management setup. In 94, you win the Leinster title, you beat Galway in the All-Ireland semi-final. So it's Limerick in the final. It's one of the all-time famous All-Ireland final comebacks, even though it was only 5 points.
Yeah.
Like, nowadays, I think, did 5 points mean more in terms of a lead back then than it does nowadays? Because the scores in some of these All-Ireland deciders are so low.
Yeah.
That 5 points now has gone in the blink of an eye. Whereas it probably felt a bit more consequential then, or am I wrong?
I don't know. I would have always been in the belief that, 5-7 points is always attainable. Okay, listen, if you're 10 points down with 10 minutes to go or whatever, obviously there's something a little bit more going on. But at least 5 points, you're still in that game. And in that 94 All-Ireland, it's a 5-point game. Now, Limerick were on top at that time, and it's hard to say. But listen, one drop of a ball, it's a goal, you have a 2-point game and you're back in it, so you just automatically keep going. And that would have been the same with everybody in any team. It's never insurmountable, But it's Eamon Cregan came in 93, And I remember doing a training session with Eamon, and I think 12 of us started the training session. And it was in January or February or January or something. And I remember snow on the ground or whatever. And only 4 finished it. And this was about, I think actually that was in 94. And this was about 2 months prior to the Kilkenny game or to the championship. So you'd wonder in terms of, where does it all come from or how
you say 4 finished it. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Lads went down injured
running.
Or were just out on their feet?
Yeah, well, injury. Yeah. We'll put it as injury. So we will. Yeah, if you want to put it that way. It was a running session, and between the levels of fitness, of course, at that time, tiredness and injuries. But there was only 4. I just remember it, So Eamon didn't have.
Not much of a base there.
Well, yeah. I mean, as he said, he said there once or twice there, he remembers himself and Derry O'Donovan, who was our fitness coach, and, another, like, Offaly kind of came and went as such. We had a couple of interesting ones where the county board or they'd arrange challenge matches and excuses would come up and the whole lot. And, there was one there, it was with Babs or was it with Babs or it was... Anyway, Regan decided that, this match was on a bank holiday down in Tipperary or whatever. So he told a few players, listen, that match is called off. So we didn't all the players believe this and that. So this, so you end up with 10 or 12. So you had that kind of mindset that they had to deal with, And I think this, as Eamon said, listen, you could, what was it? You couldn't beat them with a stick, but you could lead them with, something light. I don't know what it is. The saying is, but he knew going with the stick wouldn't work. It had to be all carrot. Near, and you had to kind of take and leave what you had. Like, I mean, you couldn't berate half the team because you'd have nothing left if they walked. That kind of way. But again, you had your discipline to an extent as well.
So where does the discipline kick in then? Because you can't win in All Ireland with.
It's the mindset.
Like a bad attitude. I mean, guys obviously at some point get it together.
Yeah, listen, I'm painting a picture here that we were kind of, on a
shambles.
Well, I wouldn't say a shambles.
Clear, that can't be the case.
No, I mean, obviously you did your trainings and that, and you'd come up, but we were losing matches in leagues. I mean, we weren't that, driven at the turn. But when it came to the important game, now you're driven. So now you're focused.
But is it not... The modern day parlance would dictate that it's too late then. Like, you win these big games in January and February.
You have to do you have to do the work, There's no doubt about it. And I mean, the work has to go in. But every team has the work done. That's all I have.
You're painting a picture of a team that didn't have the work done.
No, I'm not painting. I'm just saying that we were a bit harder to manage, okay. And that our mindset then coming into games, whether it be a league game or that, wouldn't be, we were never really overly disappointed about losing matches and that. And especially because you knew that was coming into knockouts. And there was only one game in town, and that was your knockout game. Whether it be Wexford, whether it be Kilkenny, whether it be Dublin, whether it be Laois or whatever, that was the one where you had to perform. We did our work, all right, there was, we could have probably done it better.
Well, you couldn't have done an awful lot better because you ended up walking away with the Liam MacCarthy Cup in September.
Well, of course, it's gas. Like, I mean, I hopped onto the bus in '94 with absolutely nothing to suggest that we were going to beat Kilkenny that day. Kilkenny were the All-Ireland champions. They were all back-to-back All-Ireland champions. So there wasn't anything in our preparation, in our training sessions or whatever, the month prior to that to suggest that this is going to be a thing. It wasn't as if the team were all gelling together and we're all, but listen, we were grand. We'd turn up to training, go to training, do our training, off you go, do your own business, come back on Tuesday night, go to training, put in the effort to train and off you go. But then in that 94, and once that whistle was thrown in, everything just clicked into place for Offaly. I mean, and it epitomised the goal there actually from Joe Dooley. And I think, Brian Whelan gets the ball and he passes it to John Troy. John Troy to Billy Dooley. Billy Dooley to Joe Dooley. And as Marty Morrissey had to the back of the net. A sweeping movement with everybody involved, crisp passing and the whole lot. There wasn't anything in our performance that day was absolutely right from the word go. It gelled. And then after that, we were elated. Like, people talk about team bonding. That's the biggest bond of all, where you can win that game. And then we had Wexford and then we had Galway and we had became a team in that game. Which, this is what I'm kind of saying, that prior to that, there wasn't anything 6 weeks out. There isn't anything even on the morning of the match for me to say, God, this is going to be a day.
Right, that's fascinating. That, like, the story of so many All-Ireland winners is built on slogging it through January, February, the team all coming together, going through the same kind of pain in the heart of winter. And there's you on the bus on the day thinking, I'm not sure today's our day. I'm not sure there's an All-Ireland in this team. And yet, some of those slick moves that were put together that led to that Joe Dooley goal, the brilliance of Johnny with the free, and Eamon Cregan's obviously a proud Limerick man. And when the full-time whistle goes in that 94 game, the camera cuts to him. There's a haunted look on his face.
There is, yeah, a forlorn look on his face.
Do you remember that at the time?
Again, I'm only looking back at the time. There wasn't anything in the dressing room even afterwards that to us or to me showed Eamon's I don't know what you'd put it. It's not disappointment. He's delighted for you guys. He's delighted that he's after doing a good job.
Yeah,
I presume he feels he's betrayed Limerick. He's probably the closest lad to Judas, I suppose. He's feeling what Judas is like.
He's Limerick hurling royalty.
And royalty and hard on it all. It was very hard on him, and I'd say it still kind of comes back to him and still is there in the back of the mind. Saying that, never once did that come to the forefront prior to the Limerick game. And that was him. He came in, he had a job to do. The remarkable thing about him, and about a number of years after, it's about 10 years afterwards again, I was looking at the 73 All-Ireland. It just happened to come on something or whatever. And I couldn't get over how remarkably the same the two teams were. The quick movement of the ball, even down to the players themselves. And again, it just came back to Eamon Cregan, and he had these trials and tribulations trying to put this kind of team together or that. But realistically, Offaly hurled the same way as Eamon Cregan, thought the same way as Eamon Cregan and his teams hurled. So it was a perfect match.
Are there real parallels between the personalities of Cregan and Michael Bond? Like, you have to... Offaly, this group of Offaly players, they are what they are.
Yeah.
And there's no way that you're going to turn them into this like robotic automatons who are going to do all the training, do all the drills, get the diet right, because they just won't be who they are then, and you won't get the best out of them. It's his job, and it's Michael Bond's job to get the best out of the group of players that they have available to them. Were there similarities in the two personalities where they were accepting of that? And then drive you on to get the best?
No, I wouldn't say. First and foremost, what you have to realise is, if you go to Clare, and I heard the stories in Clare as well, you're talking about characters in every team. in Kilkenny. I mean, there was a couple of mad lads in Kilkenny at that time as well, and Clare and Wexford and the whole lot. And it was just maybe a culture at that time, you know. And it has become very, well, you can't do this and you can't do that and this obviously it's very important. Listen, sports science has come on, both in nutrition, both in gym work, both in psychology. It has just come on. But Martin Hannamy was asked one time, he says, you know, you were asked to train 2 or 3 times a week. Was that a problem for you? He says, well, no, that's all we were asked to do. If we were asked to do more, we would have done more.
Would you though?
We would, of course, yeah. Because that's what you do. You fall in. Now, some lads kind of go by the wayside, and that's with every group, you know. And the majority of lads in our city and all the time, you know, you do put the shoulder to the wheel, all right, you know. But in terms of Eamon Cregan and Michael Bond was more of a, you know, encouragement. He was nearly, well, listen, lads, you know, ye nearly know what to do here. Whereas Eamon Cregan was coming in from the point of view was that, well, listen, he was after winning the All-Ireland in 73. He knew what it takes to win the All-Ireland in 73. We didn't really have anyone. Joe Dooley obviously was on the 85 one and Jim Troy was on the 85 one and that. But like the rest of us, we had one minor, all right, and that. But Eamon would have been coming in more of a kind of, you know, teacher. I said, listen, this is the level that we get to. Whereas Michael Bond is coming in after with lads that won All-Ireland. They know what to do.
Yeah.
So he was, you know, more of a plum and you know, just listen, encouragement, and that brought us on in a big way.
Very different circumstances.
Very different circumstances.
Yeah. We'll obviously get into Michael Bond in a bit more detail in a few minutes. A few months later, like what a 12-month spell for you. You've won the All-Ireland. You're just a few months later winning the All-Ireland with Birr, then the first Offaly club ever to win the All-Ireland senior club title. Can you compare the 2 wins first, like how they felt, how they differed, how were they the same?
It's I will always say, like, you know, winning the intercounty is 10 times.
That's so interesting. I didn't know how you were going to finish that sentence. Because it depends who's sitting in the chair.
Yeah.
You could put somebody else sitting where you are now and they'd say the exact opposite. And I've heard
and I understand
both sides of that thing. So that's fascinating. So you're halfway through that sentence and I'm going, I wonder how this sentence is going to finish. So you're plumbing for the intercounty one.
Definitely. I mean, it's just that you're up against the best. You're, you know, the opposition, you're up against the best opposition and a better level of hurling. The club side of it is, well, I mean, I'm really proud of actually Birr, not so much winning what we won, but there was a lot of games there where we were really actually tested, which wasn't so much in the senior and the intercounty, but in Birr we were. And that in 95, that very first game against Dunloy, and the conditions were very, very poor, and that we were playing with a strong win. We went in 3 or 4 points down, and it was the character that we showed actually in that whole second half. I think the game ended up 9 points apiece. So it did, and we even went into that last minute there a point up, and some idiot in the middle of the field decided to give the ball away for Birr. We won't say who. He's not having it on the podcast at the moment, but we won't say who. And they score an equalising point, and you know, in the semi-final we played Kilmallock, and Mike Hoolan and Dave Clark were playing for Kilmallock. And I mean, they were 4 points up with 5 minutes to go, and we end up getting 1-1-1-2 and snatching that from them. And you know, which is, you know, that's 6 months of hardship for both Mike and Dave, you know. But it was the character that I'll always be proud of. There was games there. We played Ballyhale Shamrocks in 91. In a Leinster final, and again conditions are horrendous. You know, you're talking a big strong wind here in Portlaoise, but our defending was absolutely, it was a joy. I mean, we conceded 4 points. which means we didn't give away a freeze, which means that you were in blocking down, you were in getting the hooks, and it was just a kind of backs to the wall. So there's an awful lot of proudness and in terms of the Birr performances that, we never really got into those situations with Offaly. So in that kind of thing, to win Club All-Irelands under those circumstances, because you are going to find yourself in those circumstances. But give me the All-Ireland, give me the Inter-County, give me the big day all over the place,
I was planning on spending a bit of time talking about 95 because you're the captain, but we're going to run out of time and we obviously have to talk about 98.
Right.
But you are given the captaincy, and obviously you guys aren't just a flash in the pan. You've won the 94 All-Ireland, you come back and get to another All-Ireland final. This time the situation with Limerick in 94 is just flipped on its head. You're the guys who are leading coming down the home straight, and it's the couple of goals from Clare that that kind of leave you.
It was only the one.
Only the one.
Only the one. Yeah.
In the second, they do score two on the day, but there's only one that kind of is part of the comeback.
Yeah. It's just the last ball. Again, it kind of comes in. We're 2 points up, and ball comes in, and it just falls to Taff. We did have an opportunity to draw it afterwards as well. I had a point there. I had a shot at goal actually, and it hit off the upright, which would have drawn it. My brother at his wedding brought it to my attention that I should have passed it to him, because he was in a much better position a few years later. So,
and having watched it back, do you agree with him?
I did, yeah, I should have had. But listen, and it was, and they're just the things. These are, to me, and even the 95, that's just, listen, that's maybe, it's just the man above probably.
Yeah, you win some, you lose some.
You win some, you lose some.
But you're the captain, though. Would you have had a speech written and everything?
No. I was quite immature and quite foolish enough not to have speeches written, which meant that anything could come out. And generally, in a couple of things they did, and an awful lot of times I was totally embarrassed. And looking back at it now, I'd say, you need to be a little bit more, have a little bit more decorum and maturity in that. But I didn't, and that was it. No, I didn't have it.
Was it the 94 All-Ireland preview you're asked about it, and you're like, there'll be a lot of drinking if you win it.
Yeah.
But that's a level of openness and honesty that we just will never get again. And that's what makes fellas like you and you, like, it never meant that you gave any less on the field. Well, that you were willing to answer a question with the first thing that come into your head.
And that was it. And I mean, again, lads who said, once you cross the line, this is the whole thing. Once you cross the line, and that's your attitude, and everything is given on the field, and no matter what happens off the field, and it's the same for probably a lot of people here, a lot of inter-county players, they'll go away from it off the field and then back into your daily life, humdrum daily life.
Right, this is my favourite part of this hour that I knew it was going to be when we realised we were going to be able to bring you in today. So Wexford are back. They've won the 96 All-Ireland, the 97 Leinster title under Liam Griffin, like some brilliant hurlers, the O'Connors and Martin Storey and all those guys. And they have your number for a couple of seasons. So that takes us into 98. A couple of the old guards starting to show their age, it's probably fair to say. Cregan's gone. And then you've 1 year under John McIntyre. He leaves. Babs Keating is brought in, a Tipperary legend. What do you remember of that year, which begins so well for you because Birr are back? And it's time-wise, the tables are turned. 94 was the All-Ireland Inter-County, followed by the All-Ireland Club. 98, you win the club on St. Patrick's Day. It's followed by the All-Ireland with Offaly. So you're going toe-to-toe with the great Joe Cooney against Sarsfields.
Yeah.
So you're clearly like hurling at the peak of your powers at this stage. And you win the game. Birr dominate. Is that as satisfying a win as you can ever remember?
Yeah, definitely. Both 98 All-Irelands, but definitely I really enjoyed the 98 one against Sarsfields. Probably the opposition, probably my own performance, probably that little bit more wisdom and maturity and that. And I remember actually after that one that it was on in Croke Park, but I went across the road to a pub on my own. And just to sit down after about an hour or two, just to soak it in, And I did the same there after the 2003, get away from everybody and that. But yeah, I just, it was a great performance by Birr. a good team. And again, I know Sarsfields were probably on their way down, really, but they were after putting it back to back in 92, 93. So yeah, they were a good side as well. So yeah, very, very, very pleasing.
It's interesting because you hear so often players talk about that 2 hour window post full-time whistle. You just want to be with each other. And I'm sure for the vast majority of your big days and big wins, that was the case. But
no, listen, I was kind of an idiot,
But
after the final
that hour or
whistle.
two on your own, Johnny, must have been just so tranquil, and the immense satisfaction that you're sipping a pint.
Now, I'm talking about there's no one beside me. I'm in a pub.
You're literally on your own.
I'm on my own.
Yeah, so what is that like?
And that, it's just
the joy and the sense of fulfillment just must be pouring out of you as you're sipping that pint.
Yeah, and you just know that, listen, it's just that quiet moment that you're not going to get for the next 3 or 4 days. And
you know what's coming down the track.
Yeah, you know what's coming down the track. But even at that, it's like, the next 3 or 4 days are a bit mayhem and that, And at that moment, an hour or 2 hours, you have your full senses, you're after playing the match, everything is going, the body is good, you're it's kind of awake and that, and it's marvellous because, okay, you can enjoy it the week after, but you're after having a hard week and, and that. But again, what I would turn around, these are just isolated incidents in general. I was the idiot out there with the lads clapping you on the back and looking at all the praise and that, which I'd advise any young lad, go away for that hour and soak that up, And even one of the things as well, and we didn't get too much of it, but in Croke Park, in the last kind of game, in the last year, there is that players' room upstairs. And I think it goes on now where they go back up there and just have a drink or two. Their family and friends, closeness is in there or whatever, and that's a great thing, just as you say, soak it up and feel proud,
That players' lounge is going to come back into our story now in a couple of minutes' time.
Okay.
So at what point does Babs want the likes of yourself and the Wheelahans?
Well, Babs, that
when does he want you back?
Well, listen, Babs, that year I was playing rugby, and over the couple of seasons, in 95, 90, or 96, 97.
Just like your dad, following your dad's footsteps.
Well, yeah, listen, we were rubbish at rugby, and as one of the lads says, we were playing the worst level of rugby in Europe at the time. Ireland were after beating Italy, and we were playing Leinster Division 4 in the juniors, so it's not as if we're Lions material, any of us. But what happened was, again, like that team, and we just had a team, came in, won a few matches, and had a blend. Now, at the time, there was a competition around the Midlands at the Towns Cup. And
this is rugby now.
This is rugby, and this was going on early in 98. And I remember we got to a semi-final of it, and actually, as it turned out, we played Naas, and who was playing with Naas? Only Dignan in the semi-final. But I had gone to Babs and I said, Babs, listen, there's this rugby is going on. Can I stay with it? And he says, yeah, no problem, As it turned out, in the semi-final, our full-back, he kicked the ball arseways straight into Dignan. I think Dignan ran in for a try to lose by 10-3. But anyway, that was it. But, Babs had given me that. So I had at that time. So there wasn't really any animosity between anything up to the Leinster final. There's
no sign of what's to come at any point.
Not a bit.
Is there training away? Babs seems happy enough with how things are going. I know you had a difficult league. You only won once against Antrim.
Yeah,
who went down.
Which wouldn't have been unusual for that Offaly team.
Like the way you described '94, this is a similar pattern.
I think we won the league in '91, coming from Division 2, and that. So there wasn't anything. I mean, we're looking back on it now, and we're turning around, and even in the immediate aftermath, where we went and we overanalyzed the training sessions beforehand, about the amount of running we were doing, and this was in June, whereas we were used to kind of doing the hurling, but there wasn't anything, and I mean, even in the Leinster final, we had lost, and my recollection of it is that we had hit an awful lot of wides. Kilkenny had got 2 goals from 21-yard free. One of them barely crossed the line, and I think we lost by 4 or 5 points. So It wasn't a great performance, there's no doubt, but it wasn't rubbish either. I mean, the following year in '99, Kilkenny gave us an awful beating. We weren't at the races, whereas we were matching them in this, and we were technically in control of the game as such.
So these post-match remarks, which involve the whole they're run around like sheep in a heap, this famous remark that Babs threw in there. So you're telling me this, it seemed like completely out of the blue. When did you first hear of these remarks as a group of players, and what was your reaction?
No, what happened was that, I went up, I got a lift down then after the match, as I would often do. Wouldn't the bus be taking you all hours to try and get down, you want to get down as soon as you can and that back to Birr. But I was listening in the car on the way down, and Bab's interview came on. And I remember actually just sitting and kind of sitting in between the two front seats, listening to this, and I just couldn't get over it. I was hopping kind of mad, and like all I could get from that interview was the players. And I think one of my remarks is saying is that he's not. Okay, the players have a responsibility, but it's a we situation, everybody, and that was what was really got to me on the way down. And we probably discussed it that night as well. It says, everybody just says, Jesus, and you'd be kind of giving out a bit.
So by the time you get back to Birr and by the time you've hooked up with the rest of the boys, are you seething at this stage?
I'm not seething, I just at the time I was kind of bullying. And by the time you get back and you say, Jesus, here Bab's remark, I thought that was over the top, And again, this was something what you'd be turning around and says, this could have easily come to Tuesday night training session, and this could have easily been broached at the training session. And, I would like to think that I would have stood up and says, I don't like your remarks. But as it just happened then that Liam Horn, I think was, that rang several, he rang a couple anyway, but anyway, he ended up ringing me. And I just vented that then. I just said, listen, I wasn't happy with his remarks. This whole kind of, as a manager, listen, there was problems there, should have been done. And then in the background, I don't know what players had involved. I would never been involved at any kind of county board or at any that level. Other players would have been, maybe. But Brendan Ward, and again, God rest him, he was chairman at the time. And I don't know what happened with the meeting or whatever. But as he said on the news, we're going to back our players. And so Babs was gone.
By Monday night, he's gone?
I'd say so, yeah.
Incredible. So there's no vote taken or anything?
I'd say it wouldn't be Monday night, it'd be Tuesday, Wednesday. No, okay. Because obviously the report came out on Tuesday's paper. So then you had that definitely by the Thursday, and we didn't see Babs after that. So whatever that meeting was between the two of them, obviously it didn't go, and
So is it the Thursday then that you've trained and Michael Bond walks in?
No, someone else took the training that night. I think it was the following Tuesday. Michael Bond walks in.
This is only like a week and a half before the All-Ireland quarter final.
Well, it's probably a little bit more, I think. Is it? I think we had about 2 weeks training before we played. Or no, actually,
2 weeks training before the Antrim game. So if Michael Bond isn't walking in until the Tuesday after.
No, you see, because the remarkable thing was that we had training sessions, but we went down to play Kilkenny in a challenge match after it. And we got an awful hiding. We got worse hiding than that. And this was after 2 weeks of, everything is great now and the thing, and Michael Bond is in, and we're all motoring. And we went down to Nolan Park and listen, we had Kilkenny's measure up to that point, and we were going to, and got an awful beating. So we did down there. And you're nearly back in square one. Now, we did play against Derry. We didn't really set the world on fire. At the time, the field was short as well. They were doing work. And Johnny Dooley was in the middle of the field. I think he scored something like 10 points. I think he could have scored 7 from play in the middle of the field because he was just 65 yards out. I tapped him over the bar, and that's what we did. And I think we ended up winning by 3 or 4 points. Nothing exceptional, So that was, we just had that 2 weeks there, Michael,
So you kind of get a chance to bed in under Michael with that quarter-final against Antrim. You win that by 9, then it's on to Clare in the semi-final, and then so begins one of the greatest stories in the history of the GAA. It's a 4-part documentary in itself. I'd love someone, and we know the Saipan movie's coming out. I'd love if somebody did a movie of what happened. And so we're going to kind of spend the last 10, 15 minutes of the chat with you, Johnny, talking about this. So day one, draw and Croker. This is Ger Loughnane's Clare, reigning Munster and All-Ireland champions. So there's clearly something going right with Michael Bond and the players. You don't put it up to this Clare team without like an absolute powerhouse of a team, without something being well. The replay's also in Croke Park, going Clare's way. They're well on top, they're cruising. A couple of goals bring Offaly back into it. And then, as so many of us now know, there's a couple of points in it with 2 minutes left. But there may be viewers or listeners of a different vintage to you and I, Johnny, who are listening to you speak now, and they aren't as familiar with the story. So, full-time whistle goes, Clare 2 points up. Take it away as you remember it.
As I remember it, it was just fairly straightforward in terms of we were beaten, well bent. There was a 3-point game. I didn't realise that there was another minute or two left. Hadn't performed well on the day myself, and neither had Offaly. We did make a remarkable comeback in the second half, but it was the character. It's the character of the individuals, and you were just talking there at the start, as much as said this is this fabulous Clare team. I mean, we were fabulous, so we were. I mean, they didn't have anything that we knew that we had. Like, I mean, we had John Troy, we had Brian Whelan, we had Johnny Dooley, we had Dyer and Kevin Martin. We had everybody that could match Clare. This isn't Offaly going out to play a Limerick side. That's after winning. We were toe to toe with them, and as I said in the thing, I mean, I would regard, and all the Offaly lads would regard, as we were the best team in the 90s. But saying that, two things. One is Clare obviously took their eye off the ball in the first half, in the first game. In the second game of that short game as well, unfortunately, the Oma bombing had happened the week previous, and there was actually a minute's silence just before that game. We got caught in traffic. I think we arrived into Croke Park at around a half an hour, 40 or 45 minutes before throw-in, and we weren't out for that minute silence. So our preparation going into that second game as well was off. We did, and one of the remarkable things we did stage a remarkable comeback because lads were able to move left, right, and centre, and they did so without instruction from the line. But 2 minutes to go, whistle is blown. Okay, 3 points up, game over. And the next thing, after this, I'm just shaking hands with whoever I'm after. And after this, it's the kind of clips where you go and you see Brian Whelan and Dayton, and this is the characters that we have. This is where, you didn't need the one manager over this bunch of lads, because these lads were well able to speak, and they were going in on top of the referee, and then all of a sudden it just, there was a big hull of a blue over it. And you go back into the dressing room probably about 10 minutes later or whatever, and it's still going on, and they're going, what's going to happen here? What's going to happen here? All the time I'm oblivious to really all of that, because, again, I didn't really perform on that day, bits and bobs. So you're kind of feeling to yourself, what if and this, So
you're upstairs at this players' lounge you mentioned.
Yeah.
And you're having a couple of pints with the Clare lads, and Dale and the lads are there, and you're looking out onto the pitch.
Yeah,
and you've seen thousands of Offaly.
Yeah, I mean, this is the remarkable thing. I mean, you're in the dressing room, so to go from the dressing room up to the thing is backstairs or a lift or whatever. So you don't know really what's going on the field. We went into the dressing room, shook hands, went into the dressing room, and whenever that kind of went on up to the bar and just having a pint or two and talking with the Clare lads. No animosity, no nothing, No kind of, well, listen, there should have been 2 minutes left and that, and none of that. And you're looking around the field, and all of a sudden the crowds are getting bigger out there. And I'm just saying to myself, I mean, what's the point really? And, nothing's really going to happen, because if you know the GAA, and as everybody does, you don't change a decision or whatever. But we were very lucky in terms of, and that's why you asked me earlier on about All Irelands and Club All Irelands and whatever. That really, because the crowd came on, it really did create a stir. It really did bring the attention to the mistake that was made. It made the GAA actually have a look and say, well, what's the ruling on this? And actually the ruling on this says, you're going to have to give a replay. Irregardless about the what ifs, the chances are Clare would have held on, at that time, I mean, I think the corner forward had the ball in his hand just about to strike it. If he did strike it over the bar before the whistle went, it was a 4-point game. But, and that was that, so the crowd coming on, that got us the replay. Now, we went off, we had a meeting that later on in the Spa Hotel where we were staying. And that turned into a bit of chaos as well. Some of the lads saying, listen, we'll go training in the morning. Some others were saying, no, there's not much point because we're not. And descended into kind of the county boards that fall for this as everything, And we went off amongst our merry way. And the next day I heard there that, the match was on. I think it was 1 o'clock on the Sunday. I heard that the match is on. Training's going to be on in an hour in Tullamore.
And this is why you call it the People's All-Ireland.
Yeah, definitely.
So it wasn't for the people of Offaly. You don't win a Celtic Cross that year. No.
I mean, you just couldn't see it. You couldn't see it because it would have been might have made a bit of controversial news at the sports news at the 6-1, and listen, there is questions, and then, as you say, like any good organisation, we'll bury those questions in under democracy. Nothing to see here. So, but because of that crowd, and then definitely, like, I mean, everybody realistically were then in Offaly and again, really the country as well. I mean, it was just another saga to what had happened the previous month between Offaly and Tip and or Clare and Waterford,
and Colin Lynch and the suspension.
Colin Lynch and things. So it was just another little chapter in that book.
And so the understanding is that Clare were of the belief that if they agreed to this replay, that Colin Lynch could play.
That was my understanding. Yeah, that's what I heard.
And he doesn't.
Yes.
So, I mean, you have to feel, you don't obviously, and Offaly people don't, but you have to feel awful sorry for Clare. The referee cost them that All-Ireland. Now, that's not to say they would have gone on and beaten the Cats in the final, but certainly cost them a place in the All-Ireland final. And then, having agreed to the replay on the premise that you're going to get your all-star midfielder back, that doesn't happen either.
No. You can feel sorry for
I'm not asking you to feel sorry for them, Johnny.
When you put it that way. Yeah, but you can put it in any other circumstances as well. Like, I mean, the referee didn't do his job.
Yeah.
So, and as I said, it's highly likely that Clare probably would have won that Ireland. It's highly likely we got 2 goals. It's highly likely we get 3-4. Like, I mean, we did dominate that second half, and Clare's casualness had probably kind of said, well, listen, we're over the line. So there is all of that. But definitely in the Thurles game, irregardless of Colin Lynch, there was a flatness in Clare.
But Offaly are brilliant at that.
Well, we are brilliant. Like, the most remarkable stats out of the 3 games is that it all ended up tied. We won the Thurles game by 3 points. Stephen Burns made a couple of unbelievable saves. We were hurling well in the whole lot of it as well. So there wasn't anything between those 2 teams anyway. But it was definitely one of our... But everything had mixed into that. Like, I mean, the performance on the field. But even prior to that, like, there was always talk about the Munster final and Thurles. Like, this was the day we arrived into Thurles probably at 1 o'clock, and just our bus came into Hayes' hotel, and just the crowds of people that just kind of came.
45,000 people in Semple Stadium that day.
In that day. And about, we're down about 1 o'clock now. We're getting off our bus to go into his for a sandwich and a cup of tea. And the Offaly crowds are just there. And it was just that everybody was there on that a lovely warm Saturday up into Thurles.
Felt like Munster final day.
And it felt like a Munster final day. So, like, I'd like you to add a Munster medal to my collection there. So I can, and that's how I do say it. But, and that's, all the people made that. And then afterwards as well, I mean, it was just fabulous.
And it's the final against Kilkenny is almost forgotten about because of what happened before it and the build-up and the between the Colin Lynch saga, Babs leaving, Bond coming in, the 3-match trilogy, the sit-down protest, the replay calls. You nearly forget you had to turn up a couple of weeks later and beat Kilkenny in an All-Ireland final.
But again, I'll kind of go back and we had the measure of Kilkenny right through the 90s. So we had the measure of Kilkenny from underage as well. So there was, and that's Diagnan, that's myself, that's all the lads there. Excuse me. So there was no fear going in. And we knew that, we just knew going in, so there was no fear. And I remember even in the final, I mean, we were 4 points up, and I think DJ gets a penalty with 10 minutes to go. And I just felt, okay, it doesn't make a difference what he's doing here. We're coming back down and that. So there was that. And I suppose the fact then as well, listen, we were after having 2 or 3 more games.
Yeah.
And competitive
Flying at
games.
this stage.
And now we're flying. And
That was
now
your
we're
pre-season.
And that was our pre-season. You just do it in June or July. That's all you do, pre-season. Never mind January and February.
Okay, Johnny, look, clock is against us, as always the case. So a couple of really quick ones for you.
Yeah.
Obviously, you get to another semi in 99. You get to a final in 2000, beat Cork the day you were putting it up to Sean Og. And that final in 2000 is like the last dying kick of this great legendary team. And since that day in 2000, Offaly have reached one Leinster final the last 25 years. At one point, you're in the third tier of championship hurling. You've dropped down to the Christie Ring. For the likes of yourself and those men you battled with for so long, to witness that kind of inexorable, agonising, slow death of the inter-county aspect of Offaly hurling, like after the breakup of your team, what was that like?
It's I don't know if it's sad or that. It made us out to be bitter old men. That's really what it was, because any of our criticism of any of those teams and any of those players, was felt like, you're only giving out and the whole lot, and you're not giving us our credit. We had some absolutely fabulous hurlers, better ball players than we had in that tier. The work rate wasn't there. To go down to the Christie Ring and not even come out of it in the first year. I mean, Dottie Regan was laughed at when he said, listen, Offaly are going to be in the Christie Ring, and this was before we even dropped to the Joe McDonagh, and it was very disappointing and very, it's just hard to take. But listen, realistically, it can be hard to take, but you're there for a reason. And it's not the quality of hurling, it's the pace you play it at. And it's the effort and it's the work rate that you want to put into it. And that hasn't come back yet. So it hasn't. There is, for the last 3 years, there's been a resurgence in Offaly hurling.
Led by one of those bitter and twisted old men that you referenced there.
I'd leave Leo O'Connor out of it. No,
but at least, what a job Michael has done.
Yeah, he came in, he came in as chairman, but it's even a bit more. There's a combination thing. The Faithful Fields is a big plus in it. Dignan coming in, a complete change of the county board. Small little thing, Carol Meats were sponsors there for on 20 years or whatever. They thought that all they had to do was give a check, and the old stock in the county board says, okay, well, we can't get rid of them, they've been so loyal and that. Whereas Dignan comes in and says, well, no, we need more money. And this is where Glennis came on, which, so there was that attitude. But more importantly, on top of that, is the quality of the player and the player that's coming in now. And the people got behind that Offaly those over the last 3 or 4 years. Why? Because the players were doing what the 80s players were doing, the 90s players are doing. They're chasing down. Yeah, they're all still fabulous ball players. But you'll get one of these lads running 20, 30, 40, 50 yards off a lad, flick the ball off him, or put a break in, or get a block in, and that's what brought the Offaly crowd back. But yeah, it was kind of depressing and embarrassing for 25 years.
At least things look like they're changing. An All-Ireland under-20 win, an All-Ireland minor final appearance, stayed up in Christie Ring champions, Joe McDonagh champions, stayed up in the Leinster Championship this year. So it's certainly come back a good bit of the way. Obviously, it's still not top tier yet. No. Okay, I've got about 3 more questions for you now. If possible, I want you to answer them as quickly as you can. One of the greatest books ever written in the history of sports books is The Revolution Years by Dennis Walsh. And it's obviously, if any of our viewers or listeners haven't read it, get it. It's just an amazing read from one of the best writers in the country. And it is that decade of the 90s. 6 counties win the All-Ireland. Offaly, Wexford, Clare, Limerick and Waterford all emerge from the doldrums. Not all of them won the Liam MacCarthy, but they got to semis and finals. Will we ever see the likes of that decade again, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's coming again, realistically. Limerick are going to be still a force for the next 4 or 5 years. So they are. Cork are actually after coming along. Clare are after doing fabulous underage. Offaly are going to come. Kilkenny and Tipperary is going to be there. So yeah, definitely.
Waterford have just won the minor
Waterford have just won the minor All Ireland. So there's everything.
Dublin. Don't leave out the Dubs, Johnny.
Sorry, yeah, the Dubs. And I mean, even the Dubs, like, I mean, they bet us in the under-20 this year. They were in the Leinster final at the under-20 last year. So yeah, there's loads of signs there to say that there's no dictatorship coming from the big three.
Okay, great answer. Short and concise, but brilliant. Who's the greatest player you ever played with?
Probably Brian.
Okay,
yeah.
Brian Whelan.
Yeah.
What a legend.
Yeah. He just the reading of the game. It's gas. I was training the team with Brian. His frustration that the basic club player can't do what he does is very frustrating, very funny to look at, and not absolutely great for the morale of a team. Brian can't understand why, he isn't doing this. What Brian does,
the whole Glenn Hoddle thing, he just can't.
He just can't compute, and can't say okay. Doesn't even give him the benefit of the doubt as to why he would make that mistake.
Greatest opponent, most difficult opponent.
Listen, in that time I played against Adrian Fenlon. We were probably more or less similar hurlers. Kieran Carey is probably the one. Up at that level. Again, there's other lads like Michael Coleman. God rest him as well. Big, strong individual. Like when he's running at you, you kind of try to avoid him.
Yeah, brilliant names. So out of everything that's come and gone in the last 30 years. If there was one moment above all others, whether it's Birr or Offaly, that you would love to just reenact again, what would it be?
I will just preface that the last 3 years where I've been involved with those minors has been it's just to me it's been unbelievable. What they've brought and the moments that we had, like the crowds that were at a Leinster minor final of 18,000, 40,000 against Cork, and down to Carlow and the whole lot. So they'd be mad. But realistically, the game that I would bring back would be the 95 Leinster final. Everything about it. We played well. When you look back on it, it's just the conditions. I love the rain. Hate the cold, hate that, but that rain, and I love playing in that kind of thing. And there was that sleet and the games, and it's just the colour of the jerseys, even small little things like that came. And obviously, I was captain in '95 to lift the Bob O'Keefe. So '95.
Johnny, it was great. It's been amazing. Thank you so much.
No problem, Dave.
I just hope that our viewers and our listeners have enjoyed it half as much as I have. And if they did, well, we're in a good place.
Yeah.
Johnny, appreciate you coming up, taking the time, regaling us with the stories of old. I'd say you'll never grow tired of telling them, and hope you enjoyed it as well. It's been a privilege to have you in the studio.
Thanks very much. It's very easy to talk about myself.
There's a lot of good stuff to talk about. There you have it. One of the all-time great names and all-time great midfield players in the history of the game of hurling, Johnny Pilkington, an Offaly legend. He is the latest guest on a whole sequence of brilliant guests that we've had on the Square Ball podcast. Please do log on to our YouTube page if that's where you're watching this podcast. Subscribe, leave a review, give us a couple of comments. No doubt we'll be flooded with comments on the hour that we've just spent with Johnny. So that's at the Square Ball pod. You can also get us on our social media channels on Instagram and Twitter at William Hill Ireland. You can engage with us through those channels as well. Review us our podcast on Spotify. Make sure you subscribed on Spotify and whatever other podcast platform you use. Make sure that our feed is updating every week automatically for you. We're heading into the home straight of season 2, and God, we've had some fun bringing it to you over the last few weeks and couple of months. We're not quite done yet, though. We have a few more left, and we are looking forward to bringing them your way. So until then, we will speak to you very soon. Have a great week, and we'll chat to you again next week.